Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of The Visible Workplace. My name is Dr. Tom Rolley and this is episode number 22. And it's been a very good day. Let's start off with the good news because this is something important. It is a new board day. A new board day doesn't happen very often, and this is a special day for me. My last board broke. It had been folded and had a little crease in it from some big waves that maybe happened a year and a half ago. And then about 3 weeks ago, I went out and again, we hit some big waves. It completed the crease across the bottom of the board. And by the end of the session, the whole bottom piece of the fiberglass had ripped away. This board was a 8-foot mini mal and it has died. This is very sad news. Sad news for some people because the board is gone, but for others like me, well, since it was my board, it's kind of the same person, but nonetheless, it was an opportunity to say, okay, what kind of board? So I did have another board, which was a 6'2" chosen one. And this board was a very great board, just way too small for me. And I could get up on it. I could surf it. I could catch waves, but it just did not have enough length or speed, and this left me in a dilemma what to get. Now, luckily for me, I have had some friends who are good surfers, very good surfers, been coaching in the surf world, and they said, Tom, let's go have a look at the board shops. So last weekend, we went around, checked out all the board shops, and there was one particular one at Channel Islands, M23 7-foot, and this board was the best one that I found. We looked at some mid-lengths, we looked at a bunch of other boards, but in the end, this was the board. And unfortunately, long weekend. So Sunday and Monday, the board shop was closed, and I've been working for Tuesday, Wednesday. Finally today, had a little opportunity to go across and secure this new board. So haven't had a ride of it yet, but I'm excited to get out there and test it out and find out what is happening. Now, also some new equipment. For those of you watching on the YouTubes, you'll notice that there is a new mic, and this is exciting. We have upgraded to the Rode Pod mic with the M Audio Air 192/4. So this is a first test, and if you notice that the audio quality has improved, you'll know that the gear is making a difference. So with all of that said, let's pivot across to the challenges of not being able to see the work. Now, this is the whole premise of the podcast, that there are difficulties and problems that happen when we cannot see the work that's being done. Now, this week, as well as the boards, I also had a phone call from our previous host, Annabel. And she called and said, you know what, I just had a person quit at my work and my workload has doubled. Now, this is going to reveal something very important, whether there is a bottleneck in the work that's being done. And indeed there was. At 12 cases per week, she could get through that, but suddenly jumping up to 24, 25 cases in the same amount of time, the bottleneck was revealed. And we've talked about bottlenecks in the past, but just the amount of time that it takes to do one case is around 3 hours. And I was like, whoa, then this is going to be a problem. If it previously took you 3 hours to do 12 and now they've doubled the workload, then this means that you're up for a 70-hour week. If you've been working a 30 or 35-hour week, double that 70-hour week, but you're not getting paid for that. And so there was a problem. And I was wondering, well, I said, what are you doing? What are you doing with this work? And essentially, a lot of it was just rote copy and paste. It was very strange. I was like, why are you even doing this work? It has very little value, because we discussed what the purpose of it. And it's like, hey, this is a report that goes to an insurance company and they need it to prove that this work exists. But it was all cut and paste. And in 2024, it's a little bit of a hard sell to the team member to say, hey, what we want you to do is just do this copy and paste. And my initial conversation with her had been, well, have you tried the AI? And she's like, yeah, I have, but it didn't work. It's not accurate enough. And my attempt, I said, all right, send me these reports. Let's have a look at them. And my immediate reaction when I first opened it was like, whoa, my goodness, this is a very challenging, overwhelming experience. And it took a day or two just to kind of process it and allow it to settle. Now, this is not my main job. Her work is not my main job. I've never seen this document before. But as I began to settle into it and accept that this is what they were working with, we began to look at, well, what's going on here? And essentially, it was pulling data from websites and pasting it in. It was copy and paste, copy and paste. Look up this website, copy and paste. But the template itself was relatively inefficient. And so I started to look at, well, what's this work, and breaking it down and putting it into a magic board. And suddenly it became clear that there was some things that had not been updated. The websites had changed, the websites were repeating. But in the end, I was like, hang on, there's only 4 websites here that you're referencing. So the quicker we can get to those, the better it is. And so it's like, okay, let's change the search terms a little, because if we know what we're looking for and change the search terms, and then it would bring it up, Google would just bring up the right page immediately instead of having to go to the search page on the actual website and then type it in. It's only a small step, but it was an improvement. And then I was like, well, why are you even doing this? You could have an AI or a team member do this for you. And she's like, I don't know, we don't have any help, so I got to do it. I'm like, well, how much are you getting paid? And I was like, okay, that's quite a lot for this type of relatively research work. It's like, you can get people in the third world to do this, India, Philippines, and they would be able to do this work at a much cheaper hourly rate, but they need to know what to do. And so we went through and looked at it. It's like, okay, you could do this search and then look for this particular piece of information and bring that across. And then we ran into this next problem, which was the mechanism of entry of the data was very inefficient. It had all these strange drop downs instead of just being able to paste in the data. And it's like, well, can we get rid of this? And like, no, but you've got to do it this way. Okay, this is strange, because what I realized was that this entire thing could have a variables data sheet whereby each particular job would have the numbers and the data, and that could just be put in as a find and replace. Essentially, everywhere that the job title appeared, it would just drop it in into those 15 places in the document instead of having to paste it in individually 15 times. As it was, the template was not set up for this, but it could be. That amount of work that might go in might be slow, might take a couple of hours just to go through and find all of the instances where that variable appeared and put the same variable token in. And then when the find and replace came up, you could just put in the one entry and find and replace, and it would enter it all once. Some work in the beginning, but the outcome was an asset that sped up the entire process. And we could do that for multiple variables because some of them appeared in multiple places. So if we had a variable sheet and a find and replace template that lined up, then we could drop it in much more quickly. We could have somebody else on a cheaper hourly rate do the research and then do the find and replace. And then my sister could come to the value, which was going through and making the assessment about the whole template, about, hey, what does this mean? But having her do all this research work was very inefficient. And then I asked her a question. I was like, how many of these are getting done per week? She's like, maybe 40 or 50. 40 or 50 of these being done by people being paid quite well for Western rates, and this inefficient mechanism being used. It's like, geez, okay, why is this happening? This is madness. This is silly. But because the template had never been broken apart to see what the steps were, this was the best that could be done. But as soon as the steps were visible, it was like, okay, this website needs this data into a variables, find and replace, and we're done in what used to take 3 hours and now is done in 12 minutes. And the cost of this is multiple. There's a cost to the business. They're paying 2.5 hours, let's say it was done in half an hour, paying 2.5 hours too much for these documents to be done, then there's a cost to the team member. And this is probably the most difficult one, because the people know that this work is not high value work. This is not making any difference. This is really just copying and pasting. It's pretty brain dead work. It's at risk of AI. It's at risk of arbitrage to cheaper nations. But right now, there's enough money that the insurance companies are paying that it makes sense to just keep doing as is. But this is a vulnerable workplace for burnout of the team members. And that's how she got doubled the work in the first place. Someone quit. They're like, I am sick of this work. It's not important. It's not got no purpose. It's of low value. You might be paying good money, but the work itself is of low value and could be done better, but it's not being done better. And this is an evolution. And it's a very interesting thing, because we're in this environment where there's not that many workers. Strange enough, in Australia, we still have a very low unemployment rate. And so if a job is paying about the same, but one workplace has purpose and one has copy and paste, the one with purpose is going to be far more attractive. It's going to pull in better people. A players are going to be drawn to that. And the business that's doing cut and paste is vulnerable. That if somebody works out not only that the template could be done better, that they could outsource for the research for cheaper and then have a find and replace process. But as I was going through this and realizing that 40 to 50 of these things are being done every week, that it is most likely that the vast majority of jobs have been covered. And yet there was no central database of all of this find and replace stuff already done. Instead of having to go to the websites at all, just have the entire thing ready to roll. Oh, we need that job, 611211, cut, paste. 82664, cut, paste. And so this was the true outcome. It was like, hang on, you guys should have an asset that is a document that you type in the number and it just brings in the entire thing. Could that be automated? Sure. But really the ability just to have the document all ready to go with all of the jobs that have already been done would reduce this entire experience, not from 3 hours, not to half an hour, not to 12 minutes, but to about 3 minutes. Can I type in and find the 3 codes that I need? Cut, paste, done. And when we look at that productivity increase, that somebody was previously being paid, let's say $30 an hour, so it's a $90 an hour job, and now if we're reducing it down to 3 minutes, let's say they can do 10 per hour, now you have a dramatic improvement in productivity. Why? Because we could see the work. And so the businesses that can see the work better are going to have a significant strategic advantage, not just with AI, but with the ability to reduce repetitive work down to its smallest amount possible. And while the money might cover it, in an environment with low unemployment that we have right now, you will lose good people if there is not this amazing thing called purpose. People know it. People know whether the work has purpose or not. But grinding away for 3 hours with a hint or an intuition that this work could be done in half an hour, let alone that full speed through to being able to be done in 3 minutes, let alone it was just all automated. You type in the codes and out comes the report with software, but now you're driving the cost right up. So that might not be viable. But if you do these things, then the businesses will run better, our productivity will go up, and people's happiness will also increase. So this is a very interesting situation. And the ability to do this came down to one simple thing: being able to see the work, break down the steps in the template. What do I need to do to get this result? What do I need to do to get that result? What do I need to do to get this third result? Okay, number one, I've got to know the job code. Number two, I've got to look up these 4 websites that describe various aspects of this job. Number three, I got to cut and paste these aspects into the report. And that's it. 3 steps. Repeat 3 times and have a template that's optimized, or have the entire thing templated so that you just type in the numbers and out comes all of that work already done. This is asset thinking. The asset is not the final production, but rather the optimized process to get that. And so the question is, well, where's this happening in your business or in your life that you can't see right now? The only reason this became so visible was because I built it out on a magic board. And I'm like, okay, first time it was all just in this note. I was like, ugh, okay, yep, I got all the steps, but it wasn't very functional. And then I dropped a line for each of the URLs for research, and then had the note with the actual data. And I set up a result group for each of the 3. And even though it took more screen real estate, it was very clear exactly what was done. Here's URL 1, done. URL 2, done. URL 3, done. URL 4, done. Here's the extracted data. Okay, great. Repeat 3 times and then go to the template and drop it in. This work took thinking power. It took the ability to optimize it. But once it was done, then the power of the magic board really comes in, which is the ability to save it to the library. And next time there's a report to be done, click run, execute the steps with the instructions right there. Here's where to go. Here's what to paste in. Here's where to go. Here's what to do. That we don't need to remember all of these steps or try and find all of these URLs because it's already documented. Build out the 3 result groups and paste into the template. And then hopefully over time, having repeated this a couple of times, start to see the insight that, oh, hang on, I already did that job 3 times. I can just go back and grab it from the archive and paste it in. And then that final insight of, wow, if we just had a single document with all of the codes that were searchable, I could just go and grab the code and drop it in. Then there's one more problem, which is watching for updates, but that is its own issue. Has there been an update? We need a team to check the updates. Okay, but the overall speed of production is vastly improved, all because we can see. So this is just one area of work where it is taking so long to do work that should not take that long. And not only the cost of the business, paying $80 too much for a report, but also, and perhaps more importantly, the frustration and the disappointment in the workers that leads them to quit. And then the problem compounds because there's no leeway, there's no fat on the bone anymore. Somebody quits. The only way to get more done is by having more hours. Every report is 3 hours. But if we could reduce that report down to half an hour or 10 minutes production, now double the workload, it's no longer a bottleneck. Triple the workload, it's no longer a bottleneck. Even 10x the 10x the number of required reports If you took what used to take 3 hours and reduce it down to 10 minutes, it's still not a bottleneck. So I'm hoping that you can beginning to see how working on one area of a business, particularly if that is the bottleneck, and getting it working better, being able to do the work more effectively, even if it's just that raw form of bringing it out into the open so it can be seen, it can be executed quickly, let alone second or third degree improvements, that this means that work and productivity goes way up. And businesses that use this have a strategic advantage. They can get more work done, but they can also adapt and cope with a flexible workforce. Someone's sick, they can manage. Someone gets headhunted, they can manage. The wheels don't fall off because the bottlenecks are so small that somebody else can cover, and they can cover quickly. They already can see what to do. You can bring in someone from another department or rapidly hire from a country with lots of workers, such as the Philippines, and bring them in and get the work done. You have flexibility, adaptability. And in a very fast-paced changing world, these may well be extremely valuable strategic advantages. If you want to check this out, head over to www.magicboards.io. That's all I got for you today. Thanks for joining me on the Visible Workplace. It's been a pleasure talking about this specific example, and I hope you'll join me for next week's episode. If you're not already, then go ahead and like and subscribe. And if you know someone struggling with bottlenecks in their business, frustrated, working long hours with fires left, right, and center, then point them in the direction of the Visible Workplace podcast. Once again, thanks for joining me. I look forward to seeing you next week. See you then. Thanks for joining us at the Visual Workplace. This is a notification that the information and ideas discussed here are general in nature and do not take into account your specific circumstances. You should seek specialist advice for any medical, financial, emotional, mental, or other difficulties that you are facing with appropriate specialists and professionals so that they can apply your specific circumstances and give you the required advice. Thank you for joining us, but this is also a notification that all information is indeed general in nature and not specific for your personal circumstances.